and we did a wine dinner last week with Canard Wines. So he came up, did a special menu, pairing 250. It was awesome.
Nice.
He is timely. We got to learn that when he gives you a timetable of when his food's coming out, he is not joking around. So
oh yeah,
he said 6:27, and those meatballs came out at 6:27.
That's so, where you gotta
run. He kept us going. Yeah, no, it was awesome. Well, cool. Yeah, before we just end up talking about setting things up the whole time, let's just start talking.
Yeah,
Michael
sounds
Ruhlman,
good.
Thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, so we were talking a little bit before we started this. Chef Brad Johnson of Hal Smith Restaurants introduced me to your work, the Book of Cocktail Ratios, because I am more of a cocktail guy. But it's been a pleasure kind of getting to dive into all the things you've done. I mean, the Making of the Chef, The Soul of the Chef, Reach of the Chef, your ratio books. Like, you are a very busy guy. How do you get all these books done? And kind of, for the listener out there that may not know of you, how did you get into this world?
Oh boy.
How many hours you got?
Yeah, there are various lengths of stories that can go on because it is quite complex. It was something I never planned on doing. I always wanted to be a writer. Since I was in 5th grade, I wanted to write stories and wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a professional writer. That's all I wanted to do. And I set my sights on that goal. And I did one book. I was a copy boy at the New York Times, straight out of Duke University for a couple of years. Didn't love the city, didn't love daily news journalism. I moved back to Cleveland, Ohio, and worked on a novel, then 2 novels. I got an agent. And eventually, after by the time I was 30, so about 9 years after getting out of Duke University, I got a book contract. I'd been working variously as a magazine editor, a freelance writer, a temp worker, but I finally got a book contract to go back to my old boys' school that was sort of arguing fervently that all male education is a good thing, not the toxic thing that we've been led to believe it is. And this was in 1994. And so I wrote a book about, a successful boys' school and looked at issues of sex and education, gender and education. And then I'd finished that book, and I needed another book because I wanted to be a writer. And so I thought, gosh, I was living in Cleveland, I'd written a lot of stories about food and chefs. They had half of them had gone to the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York. And I thought, wow, why don't, the country's becoming really interested in chefs and cooking. Why don't I go to the best school in the country and find out what it says you need to know in order to be a chef? And I learned very quickly, within 3 weeks, I realized that I can't write a book about what it means to be a chef unless I become one myself. And so I did. By 9 months later, I was working at the best restaurant, the grill station there, American Bounty, and I was a chef, or really the term there is cook. Anybody can call themselves chefs. Chef is sort of, it had been overused and didn't really mean much. And anybody could be a chef, but not everyone could cook. Chefs looked at another chef and pointed to one of their cooks and says, that guy can really cook. And that was the highest form of praise there was. So I became a cook. And then I wrote that book. I came home. I was probably the best student the CIA had ever had because I was both being a student, but I was also interviewing all the teachers there and recording them and taking notes and transcribing the interviews.
The most studious student, for sure.
I certainly was. And all that is to say is I was a really good student. I really learned how to cook. And I learned how to cook well. And I learned how to cook well enough that after the book was done, and I was broke, I could go get a job as a cook, which I did in Cleveland. And that only lasted a short while because in the meantime, I had gone out to a barbecue joint in Bainbridge, Ohio, in the middle of Ohio, in the sticks of Ohio. And I knew its owner, Susie Heller, was really well connected in the chef world. And she looked at my stuff, the catalog copy for the new book coming out, the New York Times book review of my first book. And she said, well, wow, I didn't know you did all this. I'm working with Thomas Keller at the French Laundry, and we're looking for a writer for his cookbook. And at the time, Thomas Keller was probably the most mysterious and esteemed chef working in America. So I went from a broke, unemployed, unknown to
Very well
being
known,
handed
yes.
tickets to the French Laundry to go write the chef's cookbook. So in very short order, in the span of, say, 3 years, I had amassed an extraordinary culinary education, both the fundamentals from the CIA and what you could do with those fundamentals when they were taken to their highest level. And once I had all that, and I wrote the French Laundry Cookbook, once I'd done that, then I could really go anywhere in the chef world, and people wanted stuff about chefs. They were interested in chefs and the work of professional cooking, and that's how I got to where I am. That led to every other book, those 2 books.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you started a toilet paper factory right before COVID hit. You were just like right place, right time, right skill set, and then
Absolutely.
demand took it off. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. At the time, chefs didn't write. They weren't writers, couldn't write, and no journalists, or very few journalists, had an actual culinary education and knew what they were talking about. So I did have an unusual skill set to bring into a very fertile landscape.
Yeah, no, and before we filmed this, we were talking about my executive chef, Brad Johnson, and we just did a wine dinner, and he hand wrote the menu, and he sent us a picture. And I remember there was a couple days that we were staring at the dessert and trying to decipher what letter, like what he was trying to say. Is this gelato? Is this yeah? A lot of chefs, pen, paper, quick writing, and it's execution. Like,
Yeah, they're about action, not about writing, not about words. They're about force and heat.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know. So I know you've written books besides ones about food and drink. I kind of focus on those just because that's my world. I am curious.
Good worlds to focus on.
Yeah. I mean, it pays the bills, and in the world of AI, it might be the only one that survives everything. So you never know.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point.
How did you get? You kind of tell the story of a mythical piece of paper with ratios in it, but how did you really get into this idea that you could simplify giant worlds just in a couple of ratios? It's such a cool idea.
Well, when I was reporting The Making of a Chef, there was a chef named Uwe Hessnar, and we were talking. He ran the skills kitchens, the initial kitchens. He oversaw all of them, and I asked for an interview because I was basically interviewing as many chefs as I could, and he made appearances in my kitchen with Chef Pardis every now and then, so he's an appropriate guy to interview, and these guys knew food, and they loved food, and they lived and breathed food, and so it was always fun to talk with them. And, we were talking about all the proliferation of the Food Network and all the recipes that were becoming available and all the books that were out there. And he pointed to his shelves, and which were buckling under the weight of all his books. And he says, "See all those books?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "I can show you their contents in 2 pages. Would you like to see it?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd like to see that." So he spun around in his little office chair and went to a metal file cabinet, pulled out a page and a half of a Xerox sheet of the ratios, of his ratios, and they include. I've got them. They're on my wall. the ratios for consomme, a ratio for hollandaise, ratio for pot de choux, probably 17 to 20 fundamental preparations. And I found them absolutely fascinating. He had boiled down hollandaise. Hollandaise can have all kinds of stuff. You have salt and pepper in there. You can have lemon juice in there. You got to have lemon juice in there. But all his was butter and yolks. If you take away the lemon juice, if you take away the salt, if you take away any other seasonings, you still have a hollandaise sauce. But if you take away the yolk, or if you take away the butter, you don't have a hollandaise sauce. So I realized he had reduced all of cooking to its essential elements. And this absolutely fascinated me. And it was so interesting that I had a friend with beautiful cursive handwriting write out the chart in beautiful handwriting, which I had her title, A History of Cooking, Ratios, A History of Cooking. And I hung it over my sink at home, and I would just stare at those ratios while I did dinner, while I did the dishes after dinner. And I just couldn't stop thinking about them. They mesmerized me. And I thought, after 10 years of staring at this sheet of paper, I'm still fascinated by it. I've got to write a book about it.
There's going to be something here. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how the book Ratio came about.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. There's an interesting story about Ratio. Ratio, again, breaks down the fundamental pieces of cooking into its component parts. Like dough, for instance, bread dough is 5 parts flour, 3 parts water. Yeah, you need a little yeast, you need a little salt, but that's not really important, the quantities. It's the ratio of the bread to the flour. A pie dough is known by its ratio. It's a 3-2-1 pie dough. It's 3 parts flour, 2 parts fat, 1 part water. That's a pie dough. And when you know that, you can make any quantity of pie dough. You can make a little mini pie dough as long as you keep to the 3-2-1 formula. That book was published in 2007, almost 20 years ago. Suddenly last summer, the publisher of that book, Scribner, called and said, I don't know what's happening, but we're getting a serious spike in ratio sales, which is kind of odd given that it's a 20-year-old book. And what turns out, there's a guy named Will Murray, a chef in London, who's a huge YouTube chef, has a huge YouTube chef channel. And he did a post on ratio and how it changed the way he thought about food and cooking. And excuse me. And over the next 9 months, this 20-year-old book went on to sell 25,000 copies, and went back for multiple printings and even another hardcover printing, which is, to sell 25,000 books is a good run for the entire life of a book.
Not just one post, yeah.
Yeah, this was
awesome.
done in 9 months. So the ideas are still valuable because they're fundamentals; they don't change, and people are still interested in them. Clearly,
I wish when I had started off, because I started off briefly server and then mostly bartender through most of my career, and I still remember working at kind of nicer places, and I wouldn't say I had any unifying principles, just like a hunger to learn and a desire to not sound stupid in pre-shift. So rote memorization was what I had available to me. And if I, had something where I could say, okay, pie dough is this, but if you switch the fat in the water, then you've got a biscuit. You have these unifying principles, all of a sudden you're not just memorizing all these different cocktails, all these terms. It would have been a much different game, but can't go back and give me my book years ago. So it goes. Yeah. And then, so from the world of ratios, I was hoping we could kind of narrow it down to cocktails, because that is mostly my world. I thought it'd be kind of a cool thing for you too, because in my estimation, I think bartenders are kind of the cooks of the front of house world. They're the only people in the front of house world that actually make something for the guest.
Absolutely.
They usually have a little bit more control of the ingredients. You trust them a little more. It has a similar split where you got the like mixologist to chef, where like some of the mixologists like you're not a cook bartender, you're just a
Right.
make pretty drinks.
Right.
But yeah, how did you get into the cocktail ratios of things? Did you just see that it applied here and you could dive in?
No, it's actually a result of something that happened during COVID, which was that we were in our pod, my wife Ann, her son Sam, his fiancee Catherine, and Ann's daughter Annabelle, and every night, I don't know how well you remember those hazy days of COVID, but there was not a lot to do. We watched a lot of movies, we spent a lot of time cooking, and every night we'd make a new cocktail. That was one of the things we did. We'd make a new cocktail. What cocktail do you want to make tonight? So I started making different cocktails, getting to know different cocktails. And it quickly became clear to me how similar all these cocktails were. They were families. That there were the sours, there were the Collinses, there were the cocktails that included a liqueur. And I thought, that's interesting. And my wife Ann said, "You got to write a book about that." Our cocktail hour eventually morphed into the Friday cocktail hour, which we did on Instagram. So every Friday during COVID, we would have a cocktail hour, and I'd make a new cocktail. We'd chat, we'd answer questions that came across the screen, and I would always conclude by reading a short poem because I love poetry. And it was fun, and people became, quite fond of it. A number of people say, that cocktail hour was a savior for me. I looked forward to that all week during those very lonely, isolated times. And many people said, "You got to write a book," and including my wife. And so I put together a proposal and managed to sell it back to Scribner, who did the original ratio.
They're used to the ratios from you. It was an easy sell.
Well,
Right.
it was another surprise. It just shows you never know where opportunity is going to come from. Like I went out looking for a cook's job when I went to see Susie Heller at that restaurant in Bainbridge, Ohio. And I came out with a job to go to the French Laundry and write the chef's cookbook. I didn't plan on that. I got in touch with Scribner when someone notified me that there had been an audiobook of Ratio. Somebody had done an audiobook of it without my permission. I talked to my agent. I talked to the publisher. Nobody had permission. She said, "Thanks for letting us know. We'll get it taken down immediately." I thought I was talking to somebody in the rights department. I didn't really know who I was talking to. But I said, "Hey, there's obviously some interest in Ratio, an audiobook. Would you consider doing an audiobook?" And she said, "Well, possibly. Are you working on anything that we could maybe dovetail it with marketing-wise? Anything that would help to sell it if we thought we could make some money doing this?" And I said, "Actually, I've got a Ratio cocktail book in mind, but I don't know who to send it to at Scribner." And she said, "Well, you'd send it to me." And it turned out I was talking with the publisher. So I sent her, Kara Watkins, Kara Watson is her name, and she read the proposal, she liked it, we came to a deal, and that's how Cocktail Ratios was born.
There it is. I love it. I am happy in hearing you tell that story too. Little side note at the beginning that you love poetry, because I think it was Soul the Chef where you compare the certification to a poetry certification. I just thought that was one of the coolest analogies I'd ever heard.
Well, thank you.
Like the absurdity of saying you're going to be a master poet just based on a few words. Yeah. I did want to ask the cocktail ratios. Why start? I think it was the Negroni. I felt like that was an interesting choice.
Is that
Maybe
what
not.
I started
It is
with?
1-to-1. Isn't it the one? Oh no, you started with the Manhattan, didn't you? But it was two spirit heavy options. I do remember that. Yeah, it looks like Manhattan and then Negroni.
All right. Michael is going to get his copy of Cocktail Ratios, and I thought that this would be a great time to say, if you have not had a chance, please, somewhere, whatever platform you're listening, leave a comment. It means the world to me. It helps us grow. It helps other people find the show. That's about it. Let's get back to Michael and Andrew.
That's really how the cocktail began. That's why I chose the Manhattan.
That's a smart entry point. That makes sense.
The original cocktail was well, the old fashionedest of cocktails was a spirit, some sugar, and some bitters. That was the original cocktail. Yeah. But then vermouth hit the cocktail world, like a rocket, and that was then became the sugar. That became the sweet. It added complexity and interest to it. So the Manhattan really is one of the earliest cocktails there is. No one really knows who invented it. They believe that it became popular at the Manhattan Club in New York City, but it was simply, and it's bedrock. It is 2 parts whiskey, 2 parts bourbon, typically, 1 part sweet vermouth, a dash of bitters, and that's it. And it makes one of the great cocktails there is. I love the simplicity of it. Cocktails have great stories behind them. And they're just a pleasure to make. They're a pleasure to share. I just love the whole cocktail world. But that's why I started with Manhattan.
And I mean, it is booze heavy, but I would say for the home bartender, it is a pretty low bar to cross to make it at home. You really need 3 ingredients. There are 3 ingredients that don't go bad quickly. It's not like asking someone to go out and get some creme de violette or anything wild.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also it's not really dependent on the quality of the spirit. You've got to use a decent bourbon, but I make it with Maker's Mark. You don't need to use a Woodford Reserve. It doesn't really necessarily make the cocktail that much better. So I also like that. It's kind of an everyman's kind of cocktail, and yet it's very elegant and sophisticated and lovely to drink.
Yeah. No, I mean, now that I think about it, that was one of the first drinks that I was really happy to get an order for when I was just starting, because it is just such a simple ratio. It was easy for me to memorize. Stir it, pour it, go. Yeah, that's a good one. Cool. And then from there,
it doesn't need to be shaken either. There's cocktails that need to be shaken if they have different viscosities to the liquids that are going into it. But this is just same viscosity, so it's just like a martini. It just needs to be stirred, not shaken. So that's another step that's easier for the bartender.
Yeah. And you were the one that did the blind taste test, right? Shaken versus stirred with your wife?
Yeah, that's in the book.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
You've done
the sad
your
thing
reading
about
well.
reading all these books is I forget where I get all these tidbits, but yeah.
But you've got it. You're a sponge.
So that one you get to stir, and then from there, I love how for each section you have that picture, and you have all the different cocktails kind of around the center there, where you can see, okay, this is this, this is this. The Rob Roy's here, then,
You mean like that?
Exactly.
The ratio wheels.
Yeah. This is not very compelling for someone just listening, but we're holding up. It's a wheel of different cocktails surrounding the Manhattan. So it's all the different variations from one
all
source.
the variations. They're the Manhattan, which is what we just talked about. The Rob Roy swaps out the bourbon for Scotch. The Martinez adds some maraschino liqueur. There's Distrato Federal, that Manhattan with tequila. There's one with rye and Shinar. That's a Little Italy. That's a new cocktail. There's the Star, which uses Applejack instead of bourbon. And there's the Palmetto, which uses rum instead of bourbon. So they're all in that same family. And you should say, for any listeners out there, they should go to the illustrator's site. We actually made coasters of these ratio wheels. So you can buy them as ceramic coasters. Her name is Marcella. I guess you pronounce it Marcella Kriebel. And it's all one word. It's her site. You can just Google Marcella Kriebel, Kriebel, and go to her site. And you can navigate your way to the cocktail stuff, and you can see all the beautiful drawings that she's done. They're available for sale from her site. But she did a great job. And I didn't want photography. For this book, I read a lot of cocktail books, especially a lot of contemporary cocktail books. And they've got page after page of beautifully lit, static cocktails. And I just didn't, it's like, that's kind of boring. Let's do something that's dynamic and brightly colored. And, people know what a drink looks like. Let's do something that's artistically interesting.
Yeah. And,
So,
you've worked on some of the world's most famous cookbooks, so But I helped a friend, Natalie Bovis, while she was going through writing her books, and cocktail books as well. And it's like, you don't realize the pain that it is to take those pictures until you go through it, too.
Oh, boy.
Because, each one, yeah.
Yep.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Cool. So, going from there, the Negroni. What are your thoughts on the Negroni?
Negroni is just one of the great cocktails because it's such a big burst of flavor. I think more chefs like the Negroni than any other cocktail because it's got so many components. It's got sweetness, it's got bitterness, it's got all the herbal influences from the Campari and from the vermouth, and it's got the heady smack of gin in there. Also an aromatic spirit. So it's just you've got so much stuff going on in this little glass that it's just it's fun to think about, it's fun to make, it's fun to drink, and it looks pretty too.
Yeah. I do like that it serves a double purpose of being very strong because it is straight booze, but also its own rate limiter because you can't really drink a Negroni quickly. It's something you sip on. Like Campari is just something that slows you down no matter what you're doing.
Campari is syrupy and sweet and bitter and maybe 2 Negronis at most. Unlike a martini, which you can have 3 of and you're under the host. The Negroni is sort of self-limiting, as you say. Although I do like it's almost a little bit out of balance in my to my taste, and I do up the proportion of the spirit, as do many bartenders. So probably the most common variation is not the 1-to-1-to-1, but it's 1.5 ounces of gin to 1 ounce vermouth to 1 ounce Campari, which is a good balanced drink. I think the traditional is a little on the cloying side, so I add a little bit more spirit. And again, that's the nice thing about a ratio. You've got the baseline, and then you make your own variation based on your own taste and the taste of your guests.
Yeah, I think you say it. I'm not going to get the quote exactly right, but it's something like, taste and trust your taste. Listen to what we have here, but ultimately it is you. It is your drink. I think you quote Jeffrey Morgenthaler and saying the good thing about making drinks at home is you can make them however you want, dude. Which exactly. I like his kind of laissez-faire style of bartending.
Me too. He's fantastic.
Yeah. Right. And then, so we go through a little bit more, and then all of a sudden citrus shows up, and we are in the daiquiri world, if I remember correctly.
Well said. Yes.
Yeah. And one of the best drinks, I think, it with the Manhattan is so beautiful because there's nothing to hide behind. You got 3 ingredients, and that's it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's beautiful. If you have a properly made daiquiri or a properly made lemon drop, just a clear spirit, sugar, and sour, it's a beautiful thing. Important to shake, as I would learn.
Yes. You need those bubbles to dance in there. Got the viscosities, mix them up, and
exactly.
I love it.
I love the sour and its many variations. And what else do we have in there? Oh, I love the sour orange daiquiri. That's probably my favorite form of the daiquiri. And then there's the gimlet. And I know Anne's favorite gimlet is the rosemary gimlet, which we learned about from David Lebowitz from his book, Drinking French, was the famous bee's knees, a prohibition drink, which it gets its sweetness from honey, not simple syrup. And I have the margarita, Tommy's Margarita, in here because that's basically a tequila sour. It's not really a traditional margarita. Anyway, it's a fun world. Oh, and then we move into the Clover Club and the whiskey and the whiskey sours, which take an egg white. So then we've got an egg white working its way in there.
And you're a man who knows a decent amount about eggs too. So.
I do indeed.
Yes.
Wrote a book about it.
You wrote a book about it, and you even taught Jimmy Fallon how to make an omelet at one point. I saw. So
I judged Jimmy Fallon and Tariq in an omelet making contest.
Yes, and with all the accolades, the one that really counts there.
Right.
Yeah, and then remind me, the White Lady Jubilee, your cocktail. That was with the margaritas, right?
Yes, because it adds it's a daisy. It's called a daisy. Is that? Yes, it is. A daisy is a cocktail that uses a liqueur. So that's a broad term. Daisy is actually, margarita is a daisy, and it's literally in Mexico. That's the name for daisy is margarita. But I put the White Lady, which is very much like a pink lady, in this because I throw in some maraschino liqueur, which is an incredible ingredient and has really transformative power over the finished cocktail. It's really it's just really interesting. It's like, one of my favorites is the improved old fashioned, which uses some of that as well as some a rinse of absinthe. So it's really an interesting, complex cocktail, a very old cocktail. Yeah, and the White Lady is basically a daiquiri with gin, a daiquiri using gin instead of tequila. So, and then I add for White Lady Jubilee some maraschino liqueur to show you what kind of impact adding in a second liqueur can be when you just add like a teaspoon of it.
Yeah, I mean, ask any bartender in 2012, and they'll tell you the same thing with a little spoonful of Saint Germain. Helped a lot of cocktails get a little bit better. Yeah. Were there any cocktails that you kind of struggled with and decided to leave out when you were writing the book?
There were cocktails that I loved that I couldn't really put in the book. Oh no, I put them in the book too. Like there's not a. There's some that don't really lend themselves to ratios that well, but I just like them a lot. And I can't remember what those were. I thought that a Mai Tai wasn't, and it's not really a ratio drink unless you make it properly. And that properly is with if you just use a Jamaica pot stilled rum.
You put the kind of towards the end the miscellaneous drinks.
Yes, those are ones that didn't quite fit into the ratio formula, even though it almost does. I mean, the Trader Vic's, the contemporary let's see, where's my Mai Tai? It's probably closer to the Trader Vic's Mai Tai, which is just 2 ounces of rum, half ounce of curacao, 1 ounce of lime, and then it's got some seasoning in the orgeat. I never know. How do you pronounce that? I
think orgeat. That's what I've heard, but yeah.
I'm never sure.
Like, we have made the interesting decision of putting it onto the menu for this last menu, and that is one of those questions that you get every day. It's like, this, and like pointing, it's like, yes, orgeat, yes. You learn quickly. You gotta put things that people can pronounce on the menu. Yeah. Yes,
or help them out on the menu. But I'm still not sure. I should Google that.
No, it is actually nice to think that even with you can classify probably 95% of the drinks still fit neatly into these ratios, that there are going to be some outliers that just you threw some things together and it actually worked. It is nice to know that it's not all perfectly neat and tidy, because nothing can be neat and tidy all the way through.
That is true. There's always there's always wiggle room here and there. Nothing is, though I have to say the Manhattan's pretty bedrock. I mean, that is, so is a 5 or 6 to 1 martini. But then again, is it 5 or 6 parts vermouth? Is it 5 to 1 or 6 to 1 gin to vermouth?
Well, I guess what I'm getting at, and I think that this kind of speaks to the power of what you do. I think the Manhattan works as a ratio for a reason. And like if we look at Maker's Mark and the vermouth you use, if you start looking and digging into them, it probably works because that much of the strong spirit at that percentage with this much of the weaker vermouth play well. And if you have, say, like barrel proof whiskey, you would have to play around with them a bit just to make it balance back out. So
Good
you
point.
get these ratios for common ingredients, but you also have to dig into why the ratios work if you have odd ingredients, if that makes sense.
No, just the different proofs of different whiskeys, say, is a good point. It's going to be stronger. It's going to be a little harsher. You may want a little bit more softening going on in that cocktail if you're using a high proof spirit.
Yeah. Or if going back to cooking, if you are using the 3-2-1 cookie, say, and you have maybe like a sweetening agent that's not as sweet as sugar, maybe you up that a little bit just to make sure the cookie still balances out. Or, maybe if you're using a different source of fat that is a little bit unique, you're going to have to play around with it a little bit,
Sure, absolutely. And that's ultimately what makes it so much fun is that there are, while there is a baseline, there are infinite nuances involved.
That's why I like in your 20, your first one is essentially use your mind, think. Yes.
Yeah, that's a book.
Is mental too.
Absolutely. That's the first thing you got to do when you sit down to cook is think.
What have you got in the pipeline these days? I think the most recent book you wrote was on the grocery store, if I remember correctly.
Yes, well, that was in 2017, and then I did a cookbook in 2019 called From Scratch.
Okay, right.
And then I did the cocktail book, and I also wrote a young adult novel. So all kinds of stuff.
Well, I guess I just got them completely flipped. Yeah.
Well, you do a lot of reading. You can't keep it all straight.
I'm sure you have a similar thing where it's like tons of notes and interviews and flashcards throughout the house and pieces of paper and open Word documents. And,
oh yeah, all over the place.
Awesome.
So what's in the pipeline now is they're taking Ruhlman's 20 out of print, and I'm disappointed by that. Because I think it's a great book, and as I said, it's all about the fundamentals. Everything I do is really about the fundamentals, and they don't change, and so the information is still really good. I understand why they're taking it out of print. It's a big, heavy book. It's gotten very expensive to publish such books these days. It's a little dated looking, but what I really want to do is to rewrite a proper fundamentals cookbook in a way that I haven't done it before. So I have a proposal out to do that. I'm hoping that goes forward. I just finished a second YA novel. And I do have a newsletter that I very much enjoy writing and has been sort of surprised in terms of how many people have subscribed. And it's just called Ruhlman's Newsletter. It's ruhlman.substack.com. So I do that. That's a regular part of my monthly work. And I wouldn't mind doing a second ratio book, like expanding the ideas of ratios into different territories than the classics.
Yeah, no, that'd be really cool. There's an endless world of food, and the world needs more people who love it and can explain it. I feel like, because I think a lot of people want to do more, but look at a recipe and get stuck, just filled with fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, everybody when they want to cook something, they just pull out their phone and Google a recipe, and they just cook whatever the algorithm spits up. And if you don't have if you know the fundamentals, you can make that recipe so much better, and you can know if it's going to work. You can know if it makes sense, and you can go at that recipe with confidence, as opposed to just sort of being reliant on the skill of the recipe writer and the and their talents, and that's all across the board.
Yeah, and guilty as charged too.
Sure, I mean, I do too.
Yeah. I mean, there also is a middle of a rush on Friday at 7:00. If someone asks for a drink I've never heard of, you bet I'm looking it up. I have no idea what you're talking about. But yeah, you can usually find some good stuff, but you can also create some disasters, and I've been guilty of both. So, yeah.
Just important to know the difference between the two.
Yes, or if you know the fundamentals, you can see from afar that it's a disaster and at least stop it early.
That's absolutely right.
Did you ever think that it would get to this point, that you'd be so well known for all of your writing that everything would work out and just people would look to you for knowledge of cooking and drinks from all over the world?
No, it's sort of funny even to hear you say it. No, I never set out to do this. I never set out to attain that kind of authority, but by virtue of the work and my care for it and my love of the subject, that's what happened.
Yeah. Hey, you keep showing up every day. That's what happens. What was working with Thomas Keller like?
Endlessly fascinating. Brilliant guy. We got along really well. We were very simpatico in how we thought. And he was, I learned more from Thomas Keller than from any other single individual. So he's a great pleasure to work with, and a very smart cook and chef. Yeah.
I've never, ever had the pleasure of being to the French Laundry. I've gone to Bouchon, me and my wife, and then we flew back for a wedding. Do what?
The one in Yountville?
Yeah. Yeah. And then we flew back for a friend's wedding, and we were about an hour away, and we made the trip to go back and eat there again. It is really good. Shockingly good.
That's one of my favorite restaurants, period. Love it.
Yeah. And no way I'm going to be getting into the French Laundry, at least not anytime soon. But that I can stomach. And man, this will actually come out after my anniversary, but I actually got my wife the cookbook before I knew me and you were talking.
Oh, really?
I was like, oh, yeah. I thought that was kind of coincidence, because I was thinking for what I could get her, and she'd love the dessert so much. I was like, this is what I'll get her. And then me and you started chatting. I was like, how about that? Small world. Who knew?
Small world. So that's a Bouchon cookbook you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a terrific book. I really love that book.
Yeah. Now, if you are listening to this and you're in California, gotta stop by the bread that they make, the little split thing they do. Super cool.
The Eppies.
So we've mentioned a couple places where people can go and find out more about you. In addition to the Substack, do you have a website, anything like that you'd like to send listeners to?
Sure. My website for anybody who wants to know more about me or my books, and my books are available through that site. It's ruhlman.com, ruhlman.com. Those two, that and my Substack are the main places on the internet where I live.
Awesome. Yeah. If you are listening to this and you did not have the ability to write that down, everything we mentioned today, his Substack, that website, everything will be in the show notes. So they'll be right there. Just click on them, go over, check it out. Is there anything that we didn't talk about so far that you'd be remiss that we missed if we stopped?
No, I don't think so. We've covered a lot of ground. Covered my whole career, really.
You've got a lot of ground to cover, so had to hit the ground running. Awesome. Well, if you are ever in Oklahoma, you have a couple of people who will show you around. I'll tell Chef Brad Johnson you said hi. And
Please do.
Yeah.
Yes, I would. Please tell him I said hello. And if I am in Oklahoma, you will know about it.
For whatever reason you're in Oklahoma. But sure. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on today.
A pleasure talking with you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening. That is today's episode. Now, if you have not taken a moment to check out our website, please do. It's servesyouRightPod.com. We have past episodes and all sorts of other things there. If you want to get in touch with me, that's the place to do it. I do appreciate that you've given me your most valuable asset, your time and attention. So thank you for listening. And stay tuned. We have some really cool guests coming up. I would hate it if you missed it. Cheers.